So of course I'm going to talk about the fact that in the North American LCS, on purpose, Jinx was picked by Cloud9 in the Cloud9 versus FlyQuest game today, and it was great because this marks the second time that Jinx has been played now in the LCS. In Europe, she's only actually made it through pick bans and been picked once, but she has been banned several times, and on this patch, she's just viable again, and that's kind of all as a spectator. For example, as a Jinx player, I've kind of I don't necessarily want her to be top tier, something that has to be nerfed later or anything like that. But now there's like a good 5 to 10 to about 11 or 12 total AD carries that are viable, and Jinx is definitely one of them, unlike past metas where she kind of hasn't been even in a meta that should have favored her, like the hyper carry meta. But what I'm going to do first, like I did in the Europe video when we did this, is cover the team composition, go over the runes and builds that Sneaky did, and then we're going to go over some highlights of the game to close it out. So first and foremost, just talking about team composition, for example, on Cloud9's team, they drafted Vladimir, Skarner jungle actually, Azir mid, Jinx of course AD carry, and Tahm Kench. And what's interesting about this comp is because if this was solo queue, this would actually make a lot of sense, right? Vladimir, Skarner, Azir even, Jinx, Tahm Kench, these are all pretty good picks in solo queue, especially depending on the elo you're in. In the professional play, where there's a lot more coordination and stuff, it's not a bad composition by any means, but something the analyst desk will even ask after the game is, well, Tristana and Braum were open, but they still went for the Jinx and Tahm Kench on purpose, so maybe Cloud9 wanted to do that on purpose, who knows?
I also wonder that C9, if they chose to do this or not, like clearly they know they can win with Smoothie on Alistar. They've also won a lot of games with Taric, so Taric and Tristana were up. And they decided to go with Jinx Tahm Kench, which is a slower, later game style. The Tahm Kench can be clutch in teamfights to save the Jinx. But if you were Taric, the whole teleports in with Skarner zooming in and Vladimir flanking, like that's an easier to execute team comp that I thought C9 would go for.
But it would have been probably an easier composition to execute because things like Vladimir and Skarner kind of want to dive in, get onto the enemy backline and stuff like that. Azir and Jinx kind of want to stay long range. I guess Azir could dive in because for some reason he's allowed to do everything still. And then Tahm Kench can keep the Jinx safe. So that kind of works out a bit in that aspect. They're going into a team comp that has, though, Gangplank, Jax, Taliyah, Ezreal, and Alistar, which has a lot of dive in itself or global presence, which we'll get into that a little bit in a second too. So composition-wise, though, it was good. If the Azir and Jinx can get their items, can get their scalings, and get to that late game, they're going to knock down all objectives on the map and completely just dominate the enemy team in terms of, if nothing else, objective control, burning down Barons and Dragons, but in teamfights, they're going to have a high amount of DPS as well. So that actually seemed pretty good going into it. Again, you had like a Tahm Kench to protect the Jinx as well, so she had a bit more protection, more so than just having the 8.2 buff as well, so it actually made it a pretty decent comp to pick Jinx into. She's not something that's really contested right now in professional play, but like I said, she's viable though, so it's still pretty good. They can pull her out here. Going into runes though, a difference we see from the Steelback game back when he played her in Europe, where he went the unsealed spellbook like the entire bot lane did, you actually see Sneaky go fleet footwork here with a sorcery second. So most likely the whole like precision in the sorcery setup. We can't actually see the entire runes. I really did try looking for them. They used to have pages where you could see like professional play and their match history and the runes that they played on them. Can't seem to find it for some reason today, sorry about that, but most likely fleet footwork. You go Alacrity for the attack speed as well, Triumph, even over Overheal, because I think I saw Triumph, evidence of Triumph, which we'll get into a little bit as well. Sorcery, of course, everybody, if you're going with these late games in Pro Play, if you don't know, Pro Play have had some very late games, 70-minute games, 90-minute games even over in Korea. So a lot of these late scaling champions are going Gathering of the Storm, because if you go to a 90-minute game with Gathering of the Storm, you're just going to have a lot of damage. Build-wise, what we also see here is kind of interesting. Sneaky, of course, really kind of spins the whole game ahead of Ezreal in farm. So one of the things we actually see is he actually just flat out rushes the Infinity Edge. Doesn't even get a Zeal item before completing the Infinity Edge, and then gets the boots, and then starts building into Runon's Hurricane. So the first two items are still Runon's Hurricane and Infinity Edge, kind of the standard a little bit depending on who you ask for the wave clear and stuff like that. Unlike Steelback, he went for more of the Energizer build when he went Fleet Foot. Well, he didn't actually go Fleet Footwork, but the Fleet Footwork Energizer build is what it's called, where you go Rapid Fire Cannon, Static Shiv, Infinity Edge. Sneaky went for the good old Hurricanes, Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon. And there wasn't actually a lot of tanks for him to deal with on the enemy team, so he wasn't going to actually get punished for going triple crit right off the bat, because even though Alistar could get tanky, he was support first, so he wasn't actually very tanky right away. Jax kind of went the Trinity Force route, so he wasn't tanky right away either. The Last Whisper item wasn't actually really needed right away in the early games, so he could get away with building triple crit right away. Furthermore, afterwards, he did build a little bit more damage behind it because he actually decided to go into Bloodthirster, because in a lot of these fights, the main problem actually was just getting chunked out and not really being able to stay in the fight long enough to DPS. So with the Bloodthirster build, it actually makes sense in my opinion. Again, by the time the game went later, things like the Jinx and Alistar still weren't super tanky, but then you also had a lot of damage and a lot of ways to stay in a fight to DPS the squishier things like Ezreal, Taliyah, and Gangplank top, because there were 3 squishies in the game. So most likely if the game would have continued further, you would have seen Sneaky pull out the Last Whisper, because then if the game went any further, Jax and Alistar would have had the chance to get more tankier and actually be a lot more of a problem, but they didn't actually get that chance to do so. So, finally, getting into some highlights into this game, if you will. The first one actually comes at about 10 minutes in the game, in which case it's unfortunate, but we actually see a dive bottom lane. I know a lot of people don't necessarily like stopwatch. We see the Jinx and Tahm Kench get shoved into the tower. Like I mentioned earlier, globals come into effect here. You have the Taliyah who roams down, uses her wall. Jax already just kind of made his way around with the blast cone to actually dive from behind. And then just for the icing on top, Gangplank ults from the top lane. He actually picks up a kill on Tahm Kench because of his ultimate, and then it's a 4v1 and the Jinx actually does get killed under her own tower. Part of why I don't really have a problem with stopwatch if it deters aggression, because there's nothing you can really do in a 5-man bot lane dive like that. I'm being a little bit biased though, so I won't be too much biased. I want to bring that up though because Sneaky actually didn't take stopwatch in this game. When it comes to starting items, he did start actually with the Doran's Blade, kind of start, you know, health pot, ward, things like that. So we didn't actually see stopwatch come out from him. Would that have stopped this dive in particular? Probably not at that point, but I just thought I'd bring that up because Steelback actually did go stopwatch, and that is something we accredited to a dive that did not happen with Camille in their game because they had stopwatch and it would seem kind of pointless. So I thought I'd put that in there as a comparison versus the other video we did versus this video. Another highlight that happens in this game is roughly at about 28 minutes. You see Taliyah kind of get caught out in the mid lane for some reason, if you will, and she tries to ult away using her wall for the mobility, but fortunately Tahm Kench is right there, knocks her off the wall, and they actually get a pick on Taliyah, and they take her out. They also have a wave pushing, and even if they didn't, it's a Azir and Jinx. So they actually end up pushing down this tower and threaten to push in the base as well. Fortunately for FlyQuest, GP ults it, and as such, that's not able to happen. They have to do back off. But from here, it does lead to a little bit of a Baron bait, a fight around Baron, in which case, Cloud9 is eventually forced off of the Baron. They don't get the Baron, but it's a bit of a back and forth. It's actually very tense, and it's kind of one of the reasons I like watching something like Jinx in pro play. It was kind of like a high risk, high reward moment. If, you know, one person gets a good crit off, like the Gangplank gets a good crit off on the Cloud9 team, it could be very bad for them, but just as well, if Jinx crits someone on FlyQuest's team, they could turn the fight around. It's like a 50-50 because of crits and stuff, and people starting to get their items. That was actually very fun to watch. The last highlight comes around 36 minutes and 45 seconds. You actually see Jax get caught out on FlyQuest's team. So suddenly they don't have their jungler. Then Alistar gets chunked pretty low. A Super Mega Death Rocket does come out, in fact. It doesn't actually kill Alistar. Crowd member yells woo like every time there was a Jinx ultimate in this game, because it is a hype moment. But as such, with the jungler gone and Alistar also chunked very low, you do see the Vladimir trying like 1v2 Gangplank and Ezreal. It doesn't work out very well, and he's also now chunked low. But then you see Cloud9 turn on the Baron. You see Taliyah use her wall to try and interrupt it, and it does stall them a little bit, but then a fight breaks out here that kind of determines the game. Jinx tries to zone out the enemy team with the Flame Chompers, and the team tries to collapse on them anyway. The Gangplank ult goes down, but Cloud9 does in fact get the Baron. What makes this really tense though is Gangplank has some crit, so his Q can or cannot crit, and it at this point will absolutely destroy a squishier target, like for example Sneaky. He does have the Bloodthirster by then, so he can lifesteal up a little bit, but a lot of Cloud9's been poked down. And Flame over the wall does actually land a double barrel on Jinx, flashes over and Qs her, but she survives with 10 health, is able to lifesteal with the Bloodthirster, and they actually turn the fight, Cloud9 does, onto FlyQuest to eventually not only take out Gangplank, take out Taliyah, take out Alistar, force Wild Turtle to back to base, and force Jax to back to base as well. But at this point, it's 38 minutes of the game. It's a Jinx who survived and then was lifestealed up through a minion wave. They have Baron buff and a Cannon wave right there, so the Jinx and the Azir then just run it up mid lane with a wave and force into the base. Now at this point, they ultimately win the game. That's just kind of it. That's all she wrote, if you will. And they take down the towers. And even though FlyQuest tries to respawn a last minute defense, they end up winning the game. One of the things to note on the ending of the game is actually Jinx does not get a single kill in this game. It's kind of like Stillback's game in a sense where he didn't actually get a lot of kills until very late into the game. Jinx was kind of an assist spot, if you will. The thing about this team comp that's also noted about the damage charts, however, is that Jinx and Azir did a lot of damage. So it's why she ended up 0, 2, and 10 in terms of assists though. A lot of those 10 kills could have easily been hers with another crit or two, but she was DPSing enough and doing her job as an AD carry to make sure that her team was at least picking up kills, and she was getting enough assists to snowball off of there. One of the reasons I brought up the runes though, because like I said, I think Triumph was used over Overheal, because when Gangplank does try to go over the wall with the flash and Q her and kill her, she actually ends up healing despite not having heal and not leveling up. So I think it's because she got the assist right away afterwards, and that also healed her up as well. She would have survived anyway, but it would have been a very sliver of health. No one was actually there to finish her off, so she could have life stood up with the Bloodthirster, but I think that's why that rune was used, as I do still try and figure out what runes did Jinx in fact use. So this is a pretty fun game to watch. Of course, North America, Jinx is a crowd favorite. When Jinx was picked, the crowd did get pretty hyped, and it was pretty fun to watch.
And JJ, by the way, you know, they had decided already coming into this weekend before they even played the game yesterday that both supports were going to get a turn on stage. So this has nothing to do with yesterday's performance, and of course they did win anyway. But JJ here kind of representing Toronto. He was a collegiate player. He was on that University of Toronto team. Now he's going to be facing off against the Jinx, though. The crowd was
they're hyped, man.
to see this one.
This crowd's as excited about Jinx as I am about Skarner. This is going to be a great game. Cloud9 really looking to appease all the fans here today. Now,
as such, this is kind of Jinx's competitive play with the Tahm Kench even, but a little bit of a comp that kind of has a mixed identity in my opinion. It wasn't really a protect the Jinx comp. It was like, hey, we have a champion to protect Jinx. We have a couple champions that want to dive, but a couple champions that want to fight long range. It's interesting, but we might see Jinx more in the future, of course. Probably not, again, pick ban every game, of course, as well. But it's fun to see a champion that kind of wasn't really present in Season 7 and Season 6 finally get a meaningful enough buff that pro players are like, hey, she's not Tristana, but we still kind of want to play her anyway sometimes. So that's all for this video. I'm going to end the question with this video the same way the Europe video. What are your expectations for Jinx in pro play? After now seeing 2 games that we've covered on this channel, do you think that she is a bit too weak in pro play? Do you think she's in the right spot? So she's like not necessarily top tier, not necessarily super weak, but not powerful enough that she'll have to be nerfed later, of course, so it's actually fine? Or do you think her in pro play is actually, I don't want to say overrated, but like not necessary? The way the meta, I guess the way the meta is in pro play, Jinx doesn't really maybe quite fit it as much. So even though we're seeing not so much Jinx, it's not really her being weak or anything like that. It's just the meta maybe not favoring her still. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching this video if you did. I don't know which video will be next because life can be quite a mess. So until next time, take care from the FlyQuest FS, and thank you for watching.